Hey everybody, welcome back to the Career Therapy live stream. My name is Martin McGovern, and today I was sent an article from someone on Instagram, and I wanted to react to it. It's from The Atlantic, and it's titled, "Why Managers Fear a Remote Work Future." I haven't read through it in its entirety yet, but we'll be pulling it up in a second and going through it together. So if you're someone who is thinking about remote work or already doing remote work or worried about the future of it, let's dig in, see what we got. All righty, grab nothing. Grab no brown liquid drugs or nothing. It's later in the day. Don't be drinking coffee yet, but let's get into it.
I'm too old for this. Been around this broken down for way too long. Left my home for this. Story-eyed, it's no surprise. Things went wrong. What was I thinking, babe? All the mistakes I made.
All right, everyone. I'll be sharing this article here real quick, and we'll be getting into it. First thing I want to share is a shout out to our patron who shared this this article, sent it over via Instagram, came across this interesting article with a take on remote work, why managers fear a remote work future. And we'll start by quoting the favorite part here. Remote work empowers those who produce and disempowers those who have succeeded by being excellent diplomats and poor workers, along with those who have succeeded by finding someone to blame for all their failures. It removes the ability to seem productive by sitting at your desk looking stressed out or always being on the phone, and also crucially may reveal how many bosses and managers just simply don't contribute to the bottom line and probably aren't needed. You can't fake the front. So huge shout out and thank you for sharing this article. I can't wait to dig into it and react. I do agree that there's a lot of bloat in companies, right? There's a lot of middle management that's not necessarily needed. And in a lot of the conversations about remote work, the question is just like, well, how come I can't just work remote? Like, as long as I'm getting my job done, what's the big deal? And that works for people who are like coders and who have deadlines and who have clear things. But for managers and middle managers, I don't know, I'm curious your thoughts, but a lot of times your work is just walking around checking on other people's work. So how do you justify that if you're at home? You're checking in on Slack or something like that? It creates some tension. So I think this evolution is happening, and there's going to be tensions that arise, and we shouldn't ignore the fact that these tensions exist. We should find ways to move through them and manage them in proper, healthy ways. Easier said than done, right? So why managers fear a remote work future? Like it or not, the way we work has already evolved, by Ed Zitron. All right. Got this lonely mother effer in the loneliest looking server room I've ever seen in my life. That's rough. There's like a Better Off Ted episode or something where someone was stuck in a server room like that. All right. So Ed is the writer of Tech and Culture, a newsletter where your Ed at where's your Ed at? And well, clearly writing these articles, Ed. And the CEO of Technology of Public Affairs at EZPR. Ooh, look at that little play on letters. In 2009, Steven Spielberg called for a ban on Oscar eligibility for streaming films, claiming that movie theaters need to be around forever, and that audiences had to be given the motion picture theatrical experience for a movie to be a movie. Okay, so Spielberg has been doing this shtick for a while. I am personally someone who loves going to the movies, but having just recently gotten a nice TV, I understand the desire to stay at home. Watching Suicide Squad on a Thursday night at home by myself and then going and seeing it again in theaters on Friday because I'm a nerd, the theater experience was more fun. It was better. I can't deny that. But having it at home was not a terrible experience. And so both are good, right? And we can say the same thing about remote work and in-person work. Remote work has its benefits. In-person work has its benefits. They're different things, and different roles need different types of in-work, out-of-work experience situations. If you're a coder, maybe you don't need to be in the office. But if you're a salesperson, well, also maybe you don't need to be in the office. But there are roles that need to be in the office, right? Being able to put stuff on a whiteboard in a group environment definitely does help. Trying to start a company remote is much more difficult than meeting up with that person in a place where you can throw your ideas up on a board and talk and chat and lean back in a chair and not schedule every single interaction, right? I've been remote work for a long, long time, and I can tell you, building professional relationships with coworkers is more difficult remote because you don't have those organic interactions. Now, you could say organic interactions aren't the most necessary thing. And I mean, I've been doing my job pretty well, so you might be right. But some people need those organic interactions. And I think just understanding that different people need different work environments is important. And that's why we should be flexible with them and not say everyone should do it one way or everyone should do it another way. But anyway, Spielberg's fury was about not only the threat that streaming posed in in-person viewing experiences, but all the ways in which the streaming giant Netflix reported theatrical grosses, budgets, and everything. Netflix held firm, saying that it's good for everyone everywhere to enjoy the release at the same time. And ultimately, Spielberg had to balk, and his company did sign a deal with Netflix. So basically, the world's a changing, Spielberg. Get on it. In key words, this fight resembles the current work remote debate in many industries, such as technology and finance. Since the onset of the coronavirus pandemic, it has often been cast as a battle between the old guard and its assumed necessities and the new guard that has found a better way to get things done. But the narrative is not that tidy. Netflix's co-founder and CEO, Reed Hastings, is one of the great disruptors of our age, deemed remote work a pure negative last fall. 60-year-old Hastings is at the forefront of an existential crisis in the world of work, demanding that people return to the office, despite not having an office himself. This, I think, is the funniest thing. All these people who are like, you can't work remote, you're not productive remote. They're the VPs that are traveling around the world all the time, right? I remember I worked for a VP. She was an amazing person. I worked remote for her. We would get on phone calls where she'd be in China. It would be like 3 a.m. her time, and she would join the call. And every month she was in a different part of the world. I thought it was incredibly amazing that she was able to manage all this, by the way. But it is a skill you have to develop. But all these people are saying, you have to come into the office, but I don't. Well, apparently it's a do as I say, not as I do situation. His criticism of remote work is that not being able to get together in person is bad. Every business leader should ask themselves a few questions before demanding their employees return to the office. Well, you know what? Maybe we don't need to go into the office every day. You could save the money on the office space and then fly everyone out a couple times a year or quarterly to hang out. And then you all do get to see each other in person. Anyway. Prior to March 2020, how many days a week were you in the office? All right, I don't know what these questions are. Some of the people loudly calling for return to the office are not the same people who will actually be returning to the office. I think it's a really good point. The old guard's members feel heightened anxiety over white-collar empires that they've built, including the square footage of real estate they've already leased and a number of people they've hired. That's the big thing, right? It's not necessarily that they want you in the office because it's helpful for the business's productivity, because we've seen throughout the pandemic that productivity stayed the same or went up for a lot of companies, and that revenues stayed the same or went up for a lot of companies, right? The issue here is that they've already bought and leased all of this real estate and they don't want it to go to waste, right? So you have to commute, you have to spend money on parking, you have to spend money on lunches, you have to spend money on gas, you have to spend money on daycare, because we don't want to lose money on our real estate. Uncool offices. Earlier this year, Google's parent company, Alphabet, rolled out an uneven return-to-work office plan for its more than 130,000 employees. The majority of workers must soon come back to the office 3 days a week, while others are permitted to keep working exclusively from home. One senior executive at the company has even been allowed to work remote from New Zealand. Hey, it's all about negotiations. Did you negotiate your work remote stuff? I think the problem is when people are just like, give it to me. All right, give it to you. Why? Make an argument. Learn how to make arguments, people. Sometimes a lot of this stuff just comes down to negotiating. Like, you're not good at negotiating, and so you haven't gotten what you wanted. Now, granted, sometimes companies are full of shit, so we have to leave room for both sides. Remote work lays bare many brutal inefficiencies and problems that executives don't want to deal with because they reflect poorly on leaders and those who they have hired. Remote work empowers those who produce and disempowers those who have succeeded by being excellent diplomats. So we already talked about that section. I've run my own remote company that operates at the intersection of technology, media, and public relations since 2013. I retained an office for a year or so that I got rid of because it was really just a place to meet before having drinks. For 7 years before the pandemic, some of my peers showed concern that my business wouldn't succeed without an in-person team. Some people really do need to show up in person. I live in Las Vegas, a city of more than 600,000 people with more than 200,000 hospitality workers, and thus I'm keenly aware of what tasks require someone to physically be there and complete them. And that's the key. Some tasks do require you to be there, some don't. And if they don't, we don't need to force people to be in the office. You can't wash dishes over Zoom. I'm sure they'll come up with a way to do it. AI, right? You can't change bed sheets over Slack. Blue-collar workers are the backbone of our city, as well as consumer electronics, show, and so on and so forth. Some jobs depend on being in physical spaces. But for the tens of millions of us who work our entire days sitting at a computer, the pandemic proved that remote work is just work. Every company that didn't require someone to physically do something in a specific place was forced to become more efficient on cloud-based production tools, and the offices started to feel like another room with internet access. And an inefficient one, if you look at the stats. It's like 4 hours a day is the average someone works when they're in an office. When you're actually at home, you work a lot more. So there's a flip side, right? If you work at home, you're going to probably work more hours. So get ready. The bargain that you bargain for, the devil that you bargain for. While many executives and managers spent the early months of the pandemic telling their employees that remote work wouldn't work long term, they are now forced to argue with the tangible proof that their still standing business is making good money and that we'll miss the office culture and collaboration. Some people will, some people won't. Let people choose. Now with the coronavirus's Delta variant threatening to delay many companies' return to office plans, the value of in-person work faces an even greater test. If you have unvaccinated kids who live with an immune-compromised person, is risking your family's safety worth serendipitous conversation with your colleagues? Should you ever go back to the office? Again, it should be a choice. Last fall, 94% of employees surveyed in a Mercer study reported that remote work was either business as usual or better than working in the office, likely because it lacks the distractions, annoyances, and soft abuses that come with coworkers and middle managers. The hell are soft abuses? That's a term I gotta look up now. Soft abuses. The damage of emotional mistreatment. Any type of verbal, psychological, or emotional abuse. Okay, well, fun. I mean, that is what a work environment is, right? Workers are happier because they don't have to commute and can evaluate mostly their actual work they can be evaluated on their actual work rather than the optics-driven albatross of office culture. I was talking to someone earlier today and they were talking about how they don't want to be taken advantage of by companies anymore, and that this is a real triggering thing for them because they knew what it was like to work in a startup environment where everyone would just stay at their desks hours past the end of the day, not because they had to get more work done, but just because they didn't want to be the first one to leave the office. So there's this odd competition of just sitting at your desk doing nothing or doing busy work just to be there late to signal that you care about the company. Come on, we've seen these things, we've experienced these things. It's ridiculous. Which is largely based, and you're also... The whole thing when I was coming up in the workforce is that companies were like, what's your cell phone? What's your email? I want to be able to contact you at any time, right? So if you're able to contact me at any time and clearly I can respond on a weekend or at night at 9 p.m., then how come I can't have flexibility during the day? If you're not going to respect my home space, why do I need to respect your office space, right? Which is largely based on either their HR handbook or the pieces of HR handbook that your boss chooses to ignore. The reason working from home is so nightmarish, now we're getting into the juicy details, for many managers and executives is that a great deal of modern businesses have been built on the substrate of in-person work. As a society, we tend to consider management a title rather than a skill, something to be promoted to, as well as a way in which you can abstract yourself from the work product. When you remove the physical office space, a place where people are yelled at in private offices or singled out in meetings, rough. It becomes a lot harder to spook people as a type of management. In fact, your position as a company becomes more difficult to justify if all you do is delegate and nag at people. Rough. Hey, if you're hearing this, you know there's truth to it. You know there's truth to it. When we're all in the same physical space, we are oftentimes evaluated not on our execution, but on our diplomacy. By which I mean our ability to kiss ass. I've known so many people within my industry and others who have built careers on playing nice rather than producing something. I just watched Horrible Bosses again. Isn't that the whole thing with Jason Bateman's character? I've seen examples within companies. I've seen lots of people who have clearly stuck around because they were liked versus productive, and many other people have responded to my newsletter and topic on remote work with similar stories. I've also known truly terrible managers who have built empires, gaining VP and C-level positions by stealing other people's work and presenting it as their own, something that, according to research, is the #1 way to destroy employee trust. We have lionized the founders and disruptors and nevertheless intra-office reputations of abrasive geniuses. I do got to get going here, but when you hire someone, you're supposedly hiring them to do a job in exchange for money. Supposedly, that's what we're supposed to be doing. But in the anti-remote crowd seems to believe that the responsibility of a 9-to-5 employee isn't simply to work, but to have the appearance and optics of the ceremony of work. Abusive work cultures grow from this process too, making people work late is much harder when you can't trap them with free food, a ping pong table, a kegerator, laundry services, benefits that you champion instead of monetary compensation. And when you are a full-time employee, you might believe that you are owned by your company and should be grateful to its leaders for generously making you show up to their office every day, which brings us back to Hollywood. Blah, 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 something about Hollywood. Don't have time for it all. But across multiple genres and decades, you gotta go with the trends. All right, I gotta run back to my next meeting, but I think there are some really important things to call out here. First one, hybrid work and the ability to choose should be where we're all moving to if there's a goal that we're all moving to. Second, you as an employee need to actually do the work to negotiate these things. And you don't get remote work without also building trust, right? The reason companies don't want to let you work remote is because they don't trust you to work remote. So until you build trust, don't expect to be given trust. Trust goes both ways. So it's on the company's job to say, we need to see these things in order to be able to trust you to work remote. And it's up to you to say, here's the things I'm going to do to help you trust me work remote, right? If you work remote and you don't respond to things and you don't show up to things and you don't get your work done, they're going to be less trusting of the next person who wants to work remote. So we all are in this together. If we want this kind of environment, we have to build this kind of environment. We all need to be part of the solution. So let's get working on it. Thank you so much for sharing this article. I love these little sort of live stream responses. I'm going to do more of these in the future. And I got to jump to my next call. So it's been a pleasure, everyone. I will see you on the next live stream.
I'm too old for this. Been around this broken down for way too long. Left my home for this. Story-eyed, it's no surprise. Things went wrong. What was I thinking, babe? All the mistakes I made.